Okay, so for today's lesson, we're going to be multiplying and dividing rational expressions. The first two that I give you here are kind of a review of what we did on 9.2 day 1. So remember, our goal here is to try and just get everything as simplified as possible. So in the top here, we could factor. So I would break this down into 2 sets of parentheses. So here in the front, I need something to put that's going to multiply to give me 4x squared. So it could be 4x and x, it could be 2x and 2x. So we're just going to have to try something and see if it works. All right, now we need something that multiplies to give us 9. So that could be 9 and 1 or 3 and 3. Again, we won't know until we plug it in and check what works. So I'm going to try 3 and 3. And remember, we need our sum to be -12. So if I check the inner, that's going to give me 6. And if I check the outer, that will also give me 6. So it looks like this works. I just need to make both of them negative. All right. And then in the bottom, that's not going to factor, but I can pull out a GCF. I can pull out a 3 from both of those. If I divide 9 by 3, I'm left with 3. If I divide -6x by 3, I'm left with -2x. So here in the top, we have 2x minus 3. In the bottom, I've got 3 minus 2x. Remember from our 9.1 notes, these are not the same thing. If it's subtraction, it cannot be written in a different order. So we can't do anything here. All right, on number 2, I want to factor the top. So x and x, and what multiplies to give me -6 adds to give me 1. That would be +3 and -2. Then we also factor the bottom. We've got x and x. We need something that multiplies to give us -27 and adds to give us -6. So for 27, we could use 9 and 3. I would need more negatives than positives to get that -6 in the middle, so this must be a +3. So now I have x plus the 3's that will cancel out in top and bottom. So I'm left with x minus 2 over x minus 9. Okay, we will still be doing the same thing. If it's in the top, we want to try and cancel it with something in the bottom when we start multiplying and dividing. So here on number 3, the first thing I'm going to do before I ever actually multiply anything together is I'm going to pull a GCF out of the top in this first part. So it looks like I can pull a 3m out of both of these. So if I pull out 3m, that's going to leave me with m minus 1. No, m squared minus 1. Sorry about that. M squared minus 1. Over, we have 6m to the 4th. Times over here, we've got 4m to the 5th. Over m plus 1. Okay, so now you may notice here we have a difference of squares. So we can factor this parenthesis here. So we have that this would break down here into m plus 1 and m minus 1. Also, I can simplify these terms here, right? So 3 and 6, this will simplify to just a 2 in the bottom. And if I divide an m from the top, this is like a 1. 1 minus 4 is 3, -3, and we would move that to the bottom. Okay, and then we still have this being multiplied times 4m to the 5th over m plus 1. Well, now I have an m plus 1 in the top and an m plus 1 in the bottom, so those are going to divide out. And we have some stuff that can simplify here, right? 4 divided by 2, that's going to make this go away, and this just becomes 2. And then for my exponents, I've got 5 minus 3, which is 2. So we have this 2. 5 minus 3 becomes m squared. And we still have m minus 1. And yes, you could distribute the 2m squared back into the parentheses, but I'm not going to require you to do that. You can leave your answer just like this. All right, let's try another one. All right, number 4. We have m minus 3 squared. Remember, squaring something means multiplying it times itself. So basically what we have here in the top is m minus 3 times m minus 3. Okay? All right. Now we are going to factor the bottom of this. So I need to decide what numbers to use. I have m and m. I need something that multiplies to give me 9 and adds to give me negative 6. Well, for 9, I could use 3 and 3. And if I want those to add to give me negative 6, I would just make them both negative. And now we have these to cross out and these to cross out. So all of this just became 1, the whole thing. All right, and here I could pull out a GCF of m, which would leave me with m squared minus 9 over m squared minus 9. Well, now I have an m squared minus 9 in top and bottom, so that cancels out. So all I have in my first one, it all became 1, and all that's left in the second one is m, and 1 times m is m. So all we are doing here is simplifying it as much as we possibly can. All right, here we are dividing. Remember, our rule for dividing fractions is keep, change, flip. So I'm going to keep the first one as it is. 80y to the 4th over 49z to the 5th v to the 7th. I'm going to change from division to multiplication, and then I'm going to flip my last fraction over. So now I have 14z to the 12th b to the 5th over 25y to the 5th. Okay, so what I'm going to do here with my y's, I'm going to want to subtract exponents, and I'm going to simplify those numbers, and then with the z's and the v's, I will want to do the same. So first, 80 and 25. Well, those will both simplify by 5. So if I divide 80 by 5, it becomes 16. If I divide 25 by 5, it's going to become 5. All right. Then if I subtract exponents here, 4 minus 5 is negative 1. I don't like negatives, so I'm going to leave it in the bottom. So this all went away, and this just became 1y, y to the 1st. Okay. And then over here, 14 and 49. Well, those are both divisible by 7. So this would become 2, and this would become 7 if I divide it by 7. Now we take care of our exponents. So 12 minus 5. 12 minus 5 is 7. That's going to become a 7. And then for v, I've got 5 minus 7. That's going to give me negative 2. I don't like negatives, so it's going to the bottom. So this just becomes a 2. So now, in the top of this fraction, all that's left is 16. And then in the bottom, we have 7v squared times, in my other fraction, my 14 became a 2. I have z to the 7th. The v completely went away. In the bottom, I have 5y. All right, now I can actually multiply these. So 16 times 2 is going to give me 32z to the 7th. And then in the bottom, 7 times 5 is going to give me 35v squared y. And there's my final answer. All right. So again, we're dividing, so we have to use our keep, change, flip rule. So I am going to keep 3x squared over x plus 2, change from division to multiplication, and flip my last fraction over. So I now have x squared minus 4 over 3x. We'll realize this is something we can factor. It's a difference of squares. So I could change this into x plus 2, x minus 2. And looky there. Now we have an x plus 2 here and an x plus 2 here, so we can divide those out. Going this direction, our 3's will divide out, and 2 minus 1 is just 1, and it's positive, so we just have an x in the top. So it looks like we are left with x, and then all we're left with here is x minus 2, and we had nothing left in the bottom. So here's my final answer. Okay, number 7. So I'm going to want to factor the top first. So if I factor, I'm going to end up with 2 sets of parentheses here, both starting with w. Something that multiplies to give me negative 24 adds to give me negative 5. So I'm going to use 8 and 3. If I want negative 5, that means the 8 has to be negative and the 3 has to be positive. And this is all over w plus 1. Times, I'm also going to factor the top of this one. So I would have 2 sets of parentheses, both starting with that w. I need something that multiplies to give me negative 7, adds to give me negative 6. Well, the only thing that multiplies to give you 7 is 7 and 1. And if you want to add to get negative 6, the 7 is negative, the 1 is positive. And this is all over w plus 3. Well, I have a w plus 3 here and here, so those are going to divide out. I have a w plus 1 here and here, so those divide out. So then all we are left with is w minus 8 times w minus 7. And yes, you could multiply those back together by FOILing them out, but I don't require you to do that. I will accept this answer. Okay, number 8. We are dividing fractions again. So remember, that means we keep, change, flip. So I'm going to keep my first fraction. I've got x cubed y squared z over a squared b squared. Change from division to multiplication and flip my bottom fraction over. So now it's b squared over a cubed x squared y. So we're just looking for things on the top row to cancel out with things in the bottom row. So let's look at the x's first. I've got an x cubed and an x squared. I subtract my exponents. 3 minus 2 is 1. So this is going to go away. And that's just a 1 up there now. Now I move on to y. So I've got y squared and y. 2 minus 1 is 1. So that goes away. Now I just have a y. There is no z anywhere to do anything about. So I'm just going to have to leave the z. I have a b squared in the top and a b squared in the bottom. So now I have z in the top over a squared times, there's nothing but a 1 left in the top, over a cubed. Remember, when you multiply, you add exponents. So 2 plus 3 is going to give me 5. So in the top, I have z times 1, which is z. 2 plus 3 in the bottom gives me a to the 5th. All right, on number 9, again, we're dividing. So keep, change, flip. I am going to keep my fraction up here as it is, but realize difference of squares here. So I'm going to go ahead and factor it so I don't have to rewrite it. So b and b, remember it multiplies to give you -1, adds to give you 0. So a +1 and a -1 over 3b plus 2. Change from division to multiplication. And then we're going to flip that bottom fraction over. So this is going to go in the top. Again, it's something that can factor, so I'm going to go ahead and do that so I'm not just having to rewrite. So in the front, I would need a 3b and a b. Then I need something that multiplies to give me -2. So 2 and 1. See if I have them in the right place. So 2 and 3. I can make that give me -1 if I make the 3 negative and the 2 positive. And since we did flip this over, there is now a b plus 1 in the bottom. All right, so now I have a b plus 1 in top and bottom that will cancel out. And I have a 3b plus 2 in top and bottom that's going to cancel out. So now I have b minus 1 times b minus 1, or you could also write that as b minus 1 squared. So remember, we're just looking for things on top and bottom that we can get to cancel out. And it's always easier to get things to cancel out if you have them in factored form. All right, number 10. Again, we're dividing, so keep, change, flip. So I am going to keep my first fraction as it is. So I'm going to have x minus 4 over. Now I'm going to go ahead and factor this so I'm not having to just rewrite it. So I would put x and x. To multiply to get 9, I would use 3 and 3. And if I want that to give me a +6, I would make both of these positive. All right, change from division to multiplication. And then we're going to flip this bottom fraction over. So then I would have 3 plus x in the top over. In the bottom, we'd have x squared minus 2x minus 8. Again, I'm just going to go ahead and factor that. So x and x, something that multiplies to give me 8. So I'm going to use 4 and 2. And I need it to add to give me -2. So the 4 must be negative, 2 must be positive. So now I have an x minus 4 in top and bottom. And I have an x plus 3 and a 3 plus x. Remember, x plus 3 and 3 plus x do mean the same thing. Order is not important when adding. So those cancel out. So now in the top, all we have are 1s. So I have a 1 in the top over x plus 3 times x plus 2. And again, you can leave it just like that. All right, last one. Again, we're dividing, so remember to keep, change, flip. So I keep the top one. This is a difference of squares, so we could go ahead and factor it. So we would have a +4 and a -4 over a plus 2. Change to multiplication. and flip the bottom. So I'm going to flip this to the top. So a squared plus a minus 2 in the top. I'm going to go ahead and factor that. So multiplies to give me 2 would be 2 and 1. And then I'm going to need the 2 to be positive and the 1 to be negative. If it adds to give me a positive 1 in the middle. And then now this goes on the bottom because we flipped it, but I'm going to go ahead and factor it as well. So I would have a and a, something that multiplies to give me 4 but adds to give me 3. So I'm going to use 4 and 1. And if I need a positive 3, then the 4 must be positive and the 1 must be negative. All right, now I'm just looking for things that I can get to cross out. So I have an a minus 1 and an a minus 1. I have an a plus 4 and an a plus 4. And I have an a plus 2 and an a plus 2. So that means all I'm left with here is a minus 4. So remember, on all of these, we just get it into factored form and see if we can get some stuff to cross out. If you would like to rewrite it before you factor it, you can do that as well. I was just saving myself having to rewrite because once we wrote it down, we were going to have to factor it before we could do anything anyway.